Hey guys, welcome to this Old Testament survey as we've been going through just kind of a 30,000 foot view of these books, and we're covering the way the Hebrew canon is ordered. We just got done with Proverbs, and Proverbs then was a good or godly wife, and then they placed the book of Ruth because Ruth exemplifies a good or godly wife. The title from Ruth is from one of the main characters. Now, she's not the main character. Boaz would be a main character of the book, or the main character. She's a secondary character. The author is unknown, but from one of the prophetic viewpoints, whether that's Samuel or someone else. The date, it occurs around the 12th century, but it's written after the Davidic monarch or even post-exile because it references David at the end, so the person is writing is looking back a couple hundred years. The theme is making of the Moabites into the great-grandmother of David, making them Moabitess, I should say, into the great-grandmother of David, and the ancestor of the second David, the coming Messiah. The purpose is to record the line of David as a king, genealogically, and to create a friendlier attitude toward foreigners, showing that true salvation is not based on race, but relationship. Because that's what Ruth being from Moab, is welcomed into the covenant people of God through faith in Yahweh. It's broken down into 4 acts, and each act pretty much follows a chapter division. So Acts 1 is the crisis for the line in the first chapter. The setting for the crisis tells us that there's no bread in Bethlehem, and Bethlehem means house of bread or house of food, and so that's an irony. There's no bread there, so they go to Moab, and Elimelech takes his wife there, Naomi, and their sons there find wives, and while living there, there's this crisis where Elimelech dies, and then their sons die. And so now it's Naomi and her 2 daughters-in-law, and women typically didn't do a ton of work outside the home in that society. They did a lot of the work from the home, preparing meals and cleaning and teaching children and so forth. And all their security and their financial future was tied up in men. So a daughter would look to her father to provide, and then when she got married, she would look to her husband, and then assuming the husband would die off because the husband was typically older, she would look to her sons to provide. And Naomi doesn't have that anymore. And so she, whose name means pleasant, says, "Call me Mara," which means bitter. And she encourages her daughters-in-law to go away and marry others. And Orpah kisses her goodbye, and Ruth clings to her and gives this covenant commitment. It's the same word for cling that we find in Genesis 2:24 of a marriage covenant, the making a vow. And she makes a vow and says, "Where you go, I'll go. Where you live, I'll live. Where you die, I'll die. Well, your God will be my God. Where you're buried, I'll be buried." I mean, she just says, "I'm going to go with you, and I'm going to stick close to you, and I'm going to see that you're provided for." So Ruth, being an outsider, understands what a covenant commitment is, and she says, "Your God will be my God." So she's learned enough about Yahweh as the one true God, and she's following him. In chapter 2, the end of chapter 1, chapter 2, we see the ray of hope for the line in Act 2. With this new setting, now they find themselves back in Bethlehem, and they find themselves as Ruth works in a field. She finds out that she's working in the field of Boaz. She doesn't know who Boaz is, but Boaz has heard about her, heaps great praise on her, provides extra blessings for her, telling the servants to drop extra sheaves of grain and so forth behind that she can have, and she comes home with far more than was ever expected. And Naomi says, "Where in the world did you go today to work?" And she tells her, and she says, "Hey, Boaz is a kinsman redeemer. He can do something about our situation. He can marry you and redeem you and provide for you and provide for me." And so we come then to Act 3 in chapter 3, and it's the complication for the line, where Naomi says, "Hey, fix yourself up. Look appropriate here. Look really good, and go at night, and this is where you're going to find him. He's going to party, and then he's going to lay down beside the grain so others wouldn't steal it. And it's nighttime where the winds pick up on the heel, and you can throw the grain up in the air. The winnowing effect and the chaff, the outside husk will blow away, and the heavier seed will fall back to the ground. And he's going to sleep there that night." And so she goes, and she sleeps next to him, and he rolls over in the middle of the night and finds her laying across him, and he's like, "Well, who are you? It's dark." And, "Well, I'm Ruth." And he says, "Oh, bless you." She goes, I want you to take care of me. I want you to," basically she's saying, "I want you to marry me." And he says, "Bless you, my child. I'm not the closest kinsman redeemer. Someone else is. But one way or the other, by morning time, you're going to be provided for." He sends her home with more grain. And then chapter 4 is the rescue of the line. And he meets the closest kinsman redeemer, and he gathers up the elders in chapter 4 and has them listen as judges of the community. And he says, this is what's happened with Elimelech and his property. And the guy says, I'll take it. And he says, no, when you take it, you also get this Moabite woman and obviously the mother-in-law is included and so forth. You're like, whoa, I can't take all that. Probably this idea of taking a Moabitess was more than that guy was willing to do, and didn't want to harm his own inheritance being passed off to others. And so he backs off, and then Boaz steps up and says, okay, you've heard him. I'm now going to take it. And so they exchange a sandal. That was something that was done back then as a transaction. And Boaz marries Ruth. And Ruth's provided for her. She has a son. Naomi helps nurse him. And Naomi is so happy. She's so blessed. God has restored that fortune to her. And Ruth is this good or godly wife that Proverbs talks about at the end of chapter 31, where the Hebrew canon mentions Ruth next to show us this is what a good godly wife looks like. The book closes with a royal genealogy, letting us know that this is the line of David. And we know from Matthew 1 that that's not only the line of David, but the line of the Messiah. So it's a great story of redemption and hope, and can do the same for us today.